May, June 2020, paper 2, variant 1. Question 1. A pendulum makes 50 complete swings in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. What is the time period for one complete swing? First of all, we need to change the time into seconds. So 2 minutes is 2 times 60, which is 120 seconds. Plus 40, so the total time is 160 seconds. To find the period for one complete swing, you need to take the total time divided by the number of oscillations. 160 divided by 50 is 3.2 seconds. In question 2, which statement describes the motion of the ball as it was moving downwards? The speed was increasing. It was quite obvious that velocity was 0, 2.8, 5.1, 7.0, and the time was 0, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6. So the time difference was constant, right? 0.2, 0.2, 0.2 keeps on increasing by 0.2. Which statement describes this motion? Is the speed increasing? Yes, it is increasing, but we do not have a increasing speed as an answer. So C is wrong. The velocity is constant. Is the velocity constant? No, the velocity is increasing. The acceleration is negative. Is the acceleration negative? No, the acceleration is not negative. It's actually positive. That's why it's speeding up. The acceleration is not constant. Yes, it is not constant because the differences between the velocities is not constant. From 0 to 2.8 is not the same as from 2.8 to 5.1 and is not the same as from 5.1 to 7.0. Which statement about acceleration is correct? Acceleration. What does it have to do with? Acceleration, it has to do with the changing speed of an object. Changing speed of an object. Which statement correctly describes the effects of placing a heavy load in a car? It is easier to accelerate and easier to bring the car to rest. Actually, no. When the car becomes heavier, it's not easier to accelerate, it is more difficult to accelerate. Okay, is it more difficult to bring the car to rest or is it easier to bring the car to rest? Actually, it is more difficult as well to bring the car to rest. I need you to think about a huge truck. Can you stop? Can you easily stop a huge truck from moving just by using your hands? No, you cannot. But you can stop a small ball, for example. When it's moving, you can stop it easily. Why? Because its mass is quite low. In question 5, what is the weight of the object? Weight equals mg. On this planet, the g is 20, so the mass 60 times g is 120. The mass of a measuring cylinder is 190 grams. 400 centimeters cubed of liquid is poured into the measuring cylinder. The total mass is now 560 grams. 4 solid objects are lowered into the liquid. Which objects will float? So we need to find the density of this liquid, which is equal to mass over volume. The mass of the liquid alone is 560 minus 190, and then when you divide by the volume, which is 400. So what is this density? 560 minus 190 over 400. This gives you a volume of, this gives you a density of 0.925. 0.925. Which objects will float? So you need a density which is less than 0.925. So you have 1 and 2 only. Diagram shows a wooden beam PQ of a negligible weight. So we'll consider the weight to be 0. The beam is 3 meters in length. The man has a weight of 800 newtons. His weight is 800 newtons. What is the distance of the man? We need to find the distance of the man. Okay. From P. When the tension in the rope, when the force in the rope becomes equal to 500 newtons. So the force in the rope is now 500 newtons. This is a very simple moment question in which you need to solve for equilibrium. Force times perpendicular distance equals force times perpendicular distance. The total perpendicular distance of the beam is 3 meters, right? This is 3 meters. So basically force times perpendicular distance equals force times perpendicular distance. 500 times 3 would be equal to 800 times the distance d. Okay, so 1500 divided by 800 would give you almost 1.9. Question is C. Which quantity is a vector acceleration? Is a vector. An object of mass 1.2 kilograms moves with a velocity of 2 meters when it is acted by a force of 4 newtons. The velocity of the object increases to 5 meters per second. And we will assume that it is in the same direction unless stated otherwise. What is the period? Okay, or for what period of time does the force act on the object? Can I find the time? Yes, this is an impulse question. An impulse question. Force times time equals mv minus mu, and both velocities are in the same direction, so we would not need to change any signs. Force is 4 newtons and the time is unknown, equals mass 1.2 times v, 5, minus 1.2 times 2. Can I find time? Yes, what is 1.2 times 5 minus 1.2 times 2? This is 3.6. So 4 times time equals 3.6. Simply divide by 4. Divide by 4. This would give you a time of 0.9 seconds. 0.9 seconds. Okay, moving on to question 10. The car runs freely from X to Y. What happens to the kinetic energy and the gravitational potential energy as it's moving from X to Y? The kinetic energy is definitely increasing because it's speeding up, but the gravitational potential energy decreases because it's moving closer to the ground. Which energy resource does not have the sun as its original source? Definitely the geothermal. Depends on the heat of the earth, of the core. On which labeled surface should the block rest to produce the smallest pressure? Smallest pressure, so you need the greatest area, the largest area. Which of these has the largest area? Surface P has the largest area. The pressure due to the liquid is immersed. 4,500 pascals. The density is 900. What is the depth below the surface? Pressure equals rho g h. Can I find height? Yes, so the height would be equal to pressure over rho g. Pressure over rho g, which is 4,500 divided by 900 times, it should be 9.8, yes, because this is an old exam. This is actually an old test, so they used 10. So if your calculation is slightly off, it would be okay. 4,500 divided by 900 times 9.8. This is 0.51. 0.51, which would have been 0.50. A lot of you might have chosen A, but A is wrong. Why? Because this is 0.51 meters. 0.51 meters, which is 51 centimeters or 50 centimeters. 50 centimeters. A gas is heated in a sealed container. The volume of the container does not change. What happens to the molecules of the gas? As you heat up the molecules, the average distance increases? No, because the volume doesn't change. The average kinetic energy increases. Yes, this B. Water in a beaker evaporates when left on a bench for a period of time. Which three factors all affect the rate of evaporation? All three factors: wind speed, surface area, and temperature. A. A solid is heated, causing it to expand. What effect? Does the mass decrease? No, mass stays constant. The density decreases. Yes, as the volume increases, the density decreases. Diagrams show 4 blocks of steel. Okay, the same quantity of thermal energy is given to each block. Which block shows the greatest rise in temperature? This would be A. You have the same amount of energy given to each block, so the smallest mass would experience the largest change in temperature. Question 18. Why are metals better thermal conductors? Because they have free moving electrons. Free moving electrons. Question 19. You have 2 freezers. Both doors are the same size and are opened for the same amount of time. Which freezer gains the least amount of thermal energy? Hmm. Is it X or is it Y? Is it X or is it Y? Actually, it would be Y. Why would Y gain the least amount of thermal energy? Because when you open the door upwards, would the cold air, think about it, would the cold air move upwards? No, the cold air will not move upwards. The cold air will remain in the freezer. The cold air will remain in the freezer. Cold air falls. Okay, you cannot have, for example, the hot air moving inwards this way. No, you cannot have the hot air moving. If you open this door, then the hot air would rise and it would go into the freezer. Yes, that's why Y would be a better freezer. Okay, to gain the least amount of thermal energy. A wave of frequency 6,600 hertz travels 1,300 meters in 4 seconds. What is the wavelength? Can I find the wavelength? Yes. First of all, can I find the speed? Yes, I can find the speed. I have the distance and the time. So 1,320 divided by 4. What's 1,320 divided by 4? 330 meters per second. So speed equals wavelength times frequency. Therefore, wavelength would be equal to speed over frequency. 330 divided by 6,600. This would be 0.05 meters. What are the amplitude and the wavelength? The amplitude is 3 and the wavelength is 8. Which statement is correct? The speed of the light in glass is equal to the speed of the light in a vacuum multiplied by the refractive index in the vacuum multiplied by the, no, it's actually divided by the refractive index. This means, from this statement, this means that the speed of light in glass is faster than the speed of light in the vacuum, which is wrong. The incident angle of ray, okay, at an air glass surface is the angle between the ray and the surface. No, it's not between the ray and the surface, it's between the ray and the normal. The sine of the critical angle at an air glass surface is equal to 1 over refractive index. Yes. Why? Because we say n equals 1 over sine c. Yes. In question 23, which row is correct? Which row is correct? So probably we need the red to be number 1. Yes, red would be the number 1. And then, as you have the remaining colors, so Roy, Gibiv, right? You have Roy, Gibiv, right? Red, blue, yellow, or yellow, blue, yes, yellow, and then blue. And intruder alarm. Which electromagnetic wave does this sensor detect? Intruder alarms use infrared. Sound travels through air at a series of compressions and rarefactions. Which statement correctly describes compression and a rarefaction? Compression. The wavelength is longer. No, it doesn't have to do with the wavelength. It has to do with the density. Compression, the density is greater or is it lower? Compression, density is greater. Yes, density is greater. That's why they are compressed, literally. 4 nails A, B, C, and D are tested to find which makes the strongest permanent magnet. One of the nails is placed against the bar magnet. Which nail becomes the strongest permanent magnet? Which nail becomes the strongest permanent? So, permanent magnet means that it will keep some of these clips attached to it. The strongest permanent magnet would be the permanent magnet with the most amount of paper clips still attached to it once you remove the bar magnet. So if you think about it, the most amount of paper clips is 3. So this is the correct answer. Okay, this would be the correct simple answer. Okay. 27. How can the circuit be altered? so that it could be used to demagnetize the steel. Okay, so demagnetization has been removed. So this question is cancelled. Okay, magnetizing and demagnetization has been removed from your syllabus. Question 28. We have voltmeter. The reading is 2.2 volts. 2.2 volts, and the reading on the current 0.25 amps. What is the resistance of each resistor? R equals V over I. 2.2 divided by 0.25 is 8.8 ohms. A lot of you would just go and say 8.8, which is wrong. Why? Because you have two resistors, you need to divide it by 2. So it would be 4.4. Okay? How much charge passes in 1 hour? How much charge passes in 1 hour? So what do I have? What do I have? I have the voltage, and I have the power, and I have the time. Can I find the energy? Yes, I can find the energy. Energy would be equal to power times time, right? I have the power 1 kilowatt, which is 1000 watts, times 1 hour, which is 1 times 60 times 60, right? So it's 1000 times 3600, which is 3,600,000. Basically, the total energy is now 3.6 times 10 to the power of 6 joules, right? You have the voltage. You have the voltage. What is the voltage and energy per unit charge? Can I find the charge? Yes. You know the equation of the voltage. Let me write it down here. Voltage equals energy per unit charge. To find the charge, it would be energy over volts. Well, basically 3.6 times 10 to the power of 6 divided by 240. This is 15,000 C. Four electrical components are connected in turn across P and Q. The cell is reversed, and the four electrical components are connected again across PQ. For which component is there a significant change in the magnitude of the current? Which component would cause a significant change? Would the thermistor cause a change? No, it can work in both directions. The resistor can also work in both directions. An LDR can work in both directions, but the diode would cause a significant change. Basically, it would cut off the current passing. You have ammeters A1 and A2. When switch S is closed, which row is correct? The resistance of the total circuit, what happens to the resistance of the total circuit? It decreases. Yes, we know that it decreases. Why? Because you now have two resistors in parallel. The reading of A1 and A2, what happens to them? They increase because the resistance and the current are inversely proportional. A1 and A2 will give the same reading. Okay, 32 is cancelled. 33 is cancelled. I guess you're in luck today. 34. Okay. The wire is moved. This wire, okay, is moved. And there is a current induced upwards out of the paper. Out of the paper. In which direction is the wire moved? Again, it is moved. And there is a current moving upwards out of the paper. Right? So you will use the Fleming's right-hand rule, right? Why Fleming's right-hand rule? Because you have an induced current, so Fleming's, okay, Fleming's right-hand rule. Right-hand rule. So you have your first finger pointing downwards, your second finger pointing out of the page. The thumb will now point from right to left. From right to left. A 100% efficient transformer converts 240 volts input to a 12 volt output. The output power can be maximum of 20 watts. The output is connected to two 0.3 amp bulbs in parallel. One of the bulbs fails. How does the current in the primary coil change? Okay, so in the first question, or in the first part of the question, can I find the input current? Yes, I can find the input current. What is the input current? We know that P input, or the primary power, would be equal to the primary or the secondary power, or you can say VP IP equals VSIS, right? VP, okay, converts 240 to, so 240, we do not know IP, equals VS 12 times IS. The output is connected to what? Two 0.3 amps, right? Two 0.3 amps. So you have two of them. 2 times 0.3. Each of them in parallel. That's why you multiply by 2. If he said in series, it would have been 0.3. And that's it. Can I find IP? Yes, I can find IP. 12 times 2 times 0.3 divided by 240, which is a current of 0.03, right? This is total current, so IP is now equal to 0.03. If one of the bulbs fails, one of the bulbs fails, what happens to the current? And can I solve it again? Can I solve it again? Yes, I can solve it again. So again, 240 times IP would be equal to 12, but times 0.3, and that's it. Times 0.3. Why? Because you have only one bulb. You only have one bulb. So IP would now be equal to 0.015. What happened to the current? It was 0.03, it became 0.015. Can I find the difference? Yes, I can find the difference. It has decreased by how much? It has decreased by 0.015. Okay? Okay. Cables transmit electrical power, okay, power station to a substation. Which situation delivers the most power to the input of the transformer at the substation? Hmm. What should I do to the voltage? What should I do to the voltage? I should increase the voltage. What should I do to the diameter of the cables? I should increase them as well. So we need large diameters and we need huge or large voltages. Uranium is a radioactive isotope, forms stable isotope of lead 207. These two isotopes are represented. During the process of decay, how many protons and how many neutrons are lost from a single nucleus of uranium to form a single nucleus of lead? Okay, we need to find the number of protons, total number of protons, and the total number of neutrons, right? It's not that hard. What is the total number of protons? It is 10. It has lost 10 protons. What about the total number of neutrons? Can I find the change in the mass number? Yes, 235 minus 207. This is 28. But 28 is the mass number. 10 of this 28 is protons, therefore 18 is the number of neutrons. Radioactive material has a half-life of 20 days. Sample contains 8 times 10 to the power of 8. How many atomic nuclei have decayed? Have decayed after 60 days. Have decayed. So first of all, 60 divided by 20 is 3 half-lives, right? We will divide by 3. We will divide by 2 3 times. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Divide by 2, 2. Divide by 2 again is 1. So the remaining number of atoms is 1 times 10, 1 times 10 to the power of 10, right? 1 times 10 to the power of 10. But he did not ask about the remaining amount. He asked about the amount that have decayed, which is 8 minus 1, giving you 7 times 10 to the power of 10. A thin sheet of paper is placed between a radioactive source. Okay, thin sheet of paper. The count rate falls to a very low reading. Which type of radiation? Only alpha, because alpha are stopped by a sheet of paper. Alpha, beta, and gamma are emitted by radioactive nuclei, which emissions can be deflected by an electric field. Electric field, you can only deflect alpha and beta.